Hello, Backspinners. Welcome to the Tour Backspin Show. I'm your host, Larry Bosch, and I'm glad you've joined us. So it's a brand new year, 2025. What are your goals? What are your golf goals? One of my goals for 2025 is to get the Tour Backspin Show uploaded much quicker than I did in 2024. Gosh, we started this podcast with a phone call at the beginning of 2024, and it's taken me this long to edit and to get it published up onto the web. Going to do a lot better in the next year, and I really want to apologize to my two guests for taking so long to get this produced. So today's show is about a podcast, and it's a great podcast that I listen to all the time. The reason the podcast works so well is that the two hosts mesh together so well. The first host, Michael Gonzalez, is a retired businessman, having headed several mid-sized companies in a career that spanned 35 years. He was introduced to the game of golf by his father and is passionate about it to this day. He has served on several boards in the golf community, the business community, and the philanthropic community. And he's been married to his wife, Jan, for 40 plus years and has two grown daughters and a grandson. Plus, he's a lifelong St. Louis Cardinals fan. Bruce Devlin has more than 40 worldwide professional wins in a career that began in 1961 after a stellar amateur career that included the team and individual title in the Eisenhower Trophy competition held at the Old Course in St. Andrews. He has 8 victories on the PGA Tour, has been inducted into the Texas Golf Hall of Fame in 2014, and is one of the only 4 players to have recorded a double eagle at the Masters, where he achieved the feat in 1967. After a successful stint on the Champions Tour, Bruce moved into the television booth to provide analysis for ESPN and NBC. He has also been a successful golf course architect and designer, and he's the board chairman of the Bruce Devlin Foundation and an active volunteer with the Ben Hogan Foundation. Bruce and his late wife, Gloria, have 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren. So this is me talking to Michael Gonzalez and Bruce Devlin of the podcast For the Good of the Game. Hi, guys.
Larry, good to join with you.
Yeah, thanks, Larry, for having us.
Let's start with how you two became friends.
Well, I'm going to take that, if I can. You left out one credit for Mr. Gonzalez. He was the benevolent dictator at Secession Golf Club in Beaufort, South Carolina, which I built back in the early 90s. So he's got quite a list, doesn't he?
He does.
I will say, though, Bruce, you sound much more accomplished than I after listening to Larry.
Well, we've. I know, Larry. We've this For the Good of the Game that we got involved in here about 3 years ago was first. Mike called me after he stepped down as the head of the golf course at Secession in Beaufort and said, "Hey, I got an idea. Why don't we tell the life stories of all the great World Golf Hall of Fame players and major championship winners, both men and women?" And first time I thought he was nuts, but we got to talking about it, and he said, with all the great players that you played with, you've always had a reasonably good reputation in the game, and he thought that I might be able to get some people to come on the show. Well, we've had a few on. Well, what's our next one? It'll be 93, Mike, right?
That's right. Yep, 93.
That's fantastic. And when I talk about the meshing of your talents, it's like, Michael, it seems to me that you do a lot of the heavy lifting as far as the research goes, and then Bruce was actually actively there, so he's like an eyewitness, and It really puts your guests at ease, and you really get some good stories, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I like to joke and say that Bruce is the technical genius on this this team. He handles all the techie stuff, and then he's also our booking agent. So that's sort of his roles.
And that's not an easy job, booking these guys. Everybody's got such a busy schedule.
Oh, well, no, I told Mike many times it's like herding cats. But really, if you think about it, to get that number of people to come on the show, it just shows that people in golf are, and I think this is true too. That you meet a lot of really nice people in golf. You can tell a lot about a person when you play golf with him, and I believe that they've been very good to us too. I mean, some of them have spent 3 hours on the podcast with us.
That's amazing. Tell us about the mission. In addition to interviewing all the living greats, it goes a little bit deeper than that. Why don't you touch a little bit on what you're accomplishing as far as archiving these episodes and getting the word out?
Yeah, you want to take that one, Bruce? Huh?
No, you. This is your area, boss.
You notice how deferential he is to me, Larry. It's I don't deserve it, but seriously, we set out when we started this, as Bruce said, to tell these life stories, and very quickly we settled on several goals for the podcast. So the first goal obviously was we need to create this content, right? And that was going to be, as Bruce said, Hall of Famers, living major champions, and others who have been influential in the game. So that was sort of goal number one, is capture this content. We like to refer to it as timeless content because we think it's going to have a long shelf life. And we would hope that in 100 years, little kids will be listening to these stories of these golf greats from the 60s, 70s, and beyond. And the reason they're going to be doing that, we hope, is because we've accomplished our second goal, which is to find a forever home for this content. And so Bruce and I have, through the LLC we formed for our relationship, have managed to put an agreement together with the United States Golf Association, and they are going to be the forever home. They're going to archive this content in perpetuity, utilize it as they wish on their platforms, and also repurpose this content. So that was sort of goal number 2. Goal number 3 was to find as broad a listenership as possible. In other words, let's get this out to people. We're not looking to make money, and I'll cover that, but we certainly want to have as many people enjoy this content as possible. Bruce and I have agreed to not profit in any way personally from this venture, and we've got an agreement among ourselves that instructs our heirs of what our wishes are, but to the extent that any money is generated from the venture, we've agreed it will all go to the Devlin Foundation to support, in most respects, junior golf.
Why don't you talk about that, Bruce, your foundation?
Yeah, well, I lent my name to a golf tournament down in Houston, where I built a golf course at Walden on Lake Conroe, and it was called the Devlin Trophy originally, and it was started in 1978, so it was, it's been quite a while since we started it. And then my 2 boys who love to play, they went down to play in it one day and said, "Dad, gee whiz, there are 6 divisions and it's taken us 6.25 hours to play. Why don't we change the format a little bit and move it from here, because it's just too busy." So we decided to form our family foundation, and move it to Secession, where we have been there now. I think this is our 14th year, is it, Mike? I think 13 or 14 years. And as Mike said, it's the money that we raise. Nobody takes any money out of it. It all goes to primarily junior golf, although we have since day one contributed to the to the foundation of the Levine Roach Foundation, where two of our members at Secession were killed on 9/11, and we started a program there where we were giving kids yearly, treats to universities, and I'm not sure of the number. Mike will probably have a better idea among the numbers than me, but I believe we're about 800 years of free tuition that we've passed along to kids in the 20 odd years that that thing's been going. So it's it's very rewarding. I must say that we get a lot of nice letters from kids and family and stuff. It's been worthwhile. And by the way, Mr. Gonzalez is on the Devlin Foundation board.
Oh, and people can find out more online at the website is called the BruceDevlinFoundation.com?
Just the Devlin Foundation, yeah. The Devlin.org.
The DevlinFoundation.com.
Yeah. .org.
.org. What a great cause. You spoke about the kind of the evergreen concept of the interviews that you're having and how they're going to be around for 100 years. I think that might be why you get so much cooperation from the greats of the game. They want to get their stories down and told so that future generations can hear them. Is that a fair conclusion?
Yeah, I personally think so. Mike?
Yeah, I do too, Larry. I mean, as Bruce said, all of these folks to date have been very, very cooperative. I think it's probably fair to say the women have been perhaps even more receptive to the men. So if you think about it, the name PGA Tour star probably has far more opportunities to continue to monetize their name and reputation through outings and speaking engagements and so forth. And as a result, they get a chance to tell their stories over and over and over again. They get quite good at it, and therefore they're quite good as a podcast guest because the recall is fantastic. The women on the other side probably don't get that opportunity as much. And so I think, therefore, they appreciate perhaps more being remembered and having their stories captured for future generations. I'll give you an example. We talked to Jenny Lidback this morning. Well, most people wouldn't know who Jenny Lidback is, right? She was born in Peru, got a great story, to Swedish father and an Italian mother. She was a college standout at Texas Christian, and then later she moved. Help me, Bruce. And LSU, All-American, won everything. Comes out on tour, qualifies multiple times or tries to qualify multiple times. It's tough. Wins about 8 times on the Futures Tour, and then she has one career victory on the LPGA Tour. Just happened to be a major.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it is.
You never know when you're going to catch lightning in a bottle in this game, right?
That's right. Yep.
So let's travel back to when you two both started discussing, hey, let's have a podcast. At that time, did you know much about podcasts? And did you go out and listen to some different podcasts to get some inspiration and to kind of work on the concept? Or how did that all come into play?
I defer to the maestro. No, I defer to you there because you're the one that came up with this idea, and you're right, Larry. He does all of the legwork on this. He's put together quite a trove of information outside of the podcast as well. So I'm sure he'll talk a little bit about that. But when did we start this, boss?
Well, so you think about it, guys. We started in April of 21, so it's a project born in COVID, during COVID, right? So I had finished my stint, about a 5.5-year stint as president of Secession Golf Club, and I woke up early in 2021 one morning and said, man, I need something to do here. I'm just that sort of person. I'm a type A, and I got to have something going. So I I thought about podcasting. I think the reason was, as a kid, loved sports, fancied myself maybe being a sports broadcaster or something. Who knows? And that I guess that's the thought that was in my mind. But anyway, I started thinking about podcasts. Didn't know much about them, to answer your question. Knew nothing about the technical side, right? Had listened to a few. So I just sort of did a little homework and said, okay, what's the golf space look like for podcast? Who's doing what? How many of them are talking about what happened last Sunday on the tour versus something that would be a bit more, as I say, long shelf life or timeless, if you will. And so I thought about golf, thought about doing golf travel, and very quickly then transitioned over to thinking about Bruce and our relationship and what the possibilities might be there in terms of just telling stories, And so as Bruce said, I called him up, we had a couple conversations, and, it was just going to start with him calling up his buddies that he played with, right? And we'd have a go. But very, very quickly, I mean, literally before we did our first interview, we decided we would do their life story. And then our thoughts crystallized in terms of our goals and what we wanted to accomplish. And so that's kind of how it got started. But, we're all self-taught. Neither Bruce or I had the equipment, had the knowledge. And it's all just, from day one, not knowing what we're doing to feeling like we're fairly proficient at producing some decent content.
I hardly even had internet.
Well, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
My internet wasn't very good when we first started, I can assure you.
And Larry, we got him a new computer. We got him, a proper kit as far as a mixer board and microphone, and pretty soon we started sounding pretty fancy.
Pretty good.
It's all of the equipment, just like golf.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you came off of your stint as president at Succession. So you were on the board for 5 years?
Well, I was actually, as Bruce said, benevolent dictator. Our governance structure is such that the president, it's a strong president, weak board. So the president runs the affairs of the club, actually as a paid employee, believe it or not.
Oh, he's president / general manager.
Yeah, although we had a GM, so I tried to stay out of the stuff day to day, But anyway, that's sort of what I did for 5.5 years, but I needed something to do, and I guess we found it.
Well, I just came off the board at the club that I belong to, and I'm looking forward to not having something to do for a year or so.
There you go.
As far as that, I mean, it's a handful to serve your club like that. You've been doing the podcast for over 3 years now. Tell us about your accomplishments, your stats, your progress. I mean, how many interviews have you done now, counting this morning's?
This would be 93.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, 93.
Wow.
I'm not sure. Mike's got all the numbers there. I don't know how many episodes we've put out. I'm thinking it's probably up around the 300 mark by now. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike. But and then
I think
then we've got like about 600 little 2 and 3 minute skits that that we thought were very nice coming out of each of the interviews. So, and Mike can give you more detail than that because he's probably got it on his computer in front of him right now.
I don't, but I work with this stuff so much. Most of it's top of mind, but we probably over 92 interviews. We probably have over 200 hours of content now. We do capture video as well as audio, and so while people haven't seen any of our video content, we intend to use it at some point. We probably have video for over 90% of our interviews. And Bruce mentioned 300 episodes. Probably in terms of full content episodes, that's probably about right. We're going to be, including these short tracks that Bruce mentioned, we're going to be, I think, with the first Brandy Burton one, which we'll release, the first part one of her interview. I think that will be episode number 400 that we'll do. Okay, so whole lot of content across those people, but we've got a lot of work to do, right? So if you think about how many living major winners there are, men and women, there's 221 living winners of majors around the world, right? Not all of them speak English, by the way, so that's another issue. But But we've done 83 of those so far, right? And then if you look at World Golf Hall of Famers, there's 52 living World Golf Hall of Famers. Well, we've done about 80% of them. We've done 41 plus Kathy Whitworth, if you count her, as among the deceased members of the World Golf Hall of Fame. So we've got 6 men to do, 5 women to do. So we're chipping away at it.
Well, that's fantastic. It also brings up kind of structural, how you structure your interviews, because like this morning's guest has 1 major, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you've interviewed Jack Nicklaus, who's got 19.
18,
how, yeah. So how exactly do you go about presenting that much content, and how do you deliver that content to your listeners?
Well, Bruce, you can use our Padraig or Bernard examples.
Yeah. There's we start off with the program that we start off when they were growing up in their wherever they were, whether in Germany or Australia or here, wherever, and then try to go through the early days, who introduced them to the game, where they went to high school, college, amateur career, professional career, and sort of break them down in segments. And sometimes you get to a situation where, like with Bernhard Langer, for instance, I think the early story, the first part of his story, is quite remarkable. We've sat down there with him now twice, so. And we've probably done 3.5 hours with him total. 3 hours anyhow, probably.
Yeah.
And we
haven't
still
even
haven't
gotten to the Champions Tour yet.
We still haven't. We haven't finished his PGA career. And then Padraig Harrington, I thought was quite remarkable. We sat down with him. The first time we sat down with him was for about, I guess, close to 2 hours, Mike, wasn't it? And
yeah.
We never got to any part of his golf game. His story, the story was him growing up in the split island, the north and south, and it was very interesting because his family were in the police. So we heard a lot about what was going on in Ireland. So it was very interesting, and that's something that you wouldn't, nobody on the tour. The people, the press on the tour, would want to sit and listen to that, at a golf tournament. So nobody's probably ever heard that.
Right, exactly. No golf fan would know that.
No. Yeah, so 2 hours with Padraig. He hasn't even turned pro yet, right? But we get done with him. We're kind of wrapping up. We thank him. We said, and he said, hey, "This is great, guys." He says, "I never get to talk about this stuff. I'm always talking about everything. Open this and open that." And so, these guys have fun doing this.
Yeah.
That's great. So, who are some of your favorites that you've interviewed?
I'll let you
one
start,
of my
Bruce.
One of my favorites was Hal Sutton, because Hal Sutton's got no filters. Whatever is on Hal's mind, it comes roaring out straight at you. So I really enjoyed listening to Hal and tell all of his bit. Well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it, when he hits a golf shot and then talks it, like when he won at the Players, for instance. So I really enjoyed his interview, and Bernhard's. I think the early part of Bernhard Langer's life was quite interesting, and it's something that nobody else would ever have heard of until we did this podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some guys like Hal would have, you say he didn't have any filter, and then others have told these stories so many times that it's almost like they just can push a button and tell the story. Which are your favorite types to have an interview with?
Well, for me, I gravitate toward the ones that maybe don't have the accomplishments and the record, right? One example comes to mind. This was early on in our interviews, and that was just Bill Rogers, right? Again, not many people know a lot about Bill Rogers, but in 1981, he was the world beater. There was nobody better than Bill Rogers. He won 7 times in 1981, including the Open Championship Royal St. George's, and nobody could touch the guy, right? And Bruce knows this. And yet what struck me about Bill, because he had to give it up early, he got burnt out, and IMG ran him around the planet. But what struck me about Bill was he's just a good guy, just down to earth, appreciative of what Bruce and I were doing, humble. And so that's the ones to me that I really enjoy doing. I mean, not that I don't enjoy the more accomplished players, because they're all good in their own way, but it's the conversations like that, or even like Charlie Cootie. I just enjoyed, or Bobby Nichols. I just enjoyed those guys.
Those are 2 really good ones.
Yeah.
They kept you chuckling.
Yeah.
Back to back.
Yeah.
Back to back. I was going to say in 81, he held 4 Open titles at the same time.
National Open titles, yeah.
That was the British, the Canadian, the Australian. What else? Oh, I've lost the other one. French.
Maybe
I'd
Canadian?
have to think about it, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
who have been some of the surprises, or what have been some of the surprises that you've stumbled across while you've been doing this?
Oh, surprise.
Well, I'll relate one. It shouldn't come as a surprise, but again, this was early in our podcasting career, right? So we were still novices, and we script them out fairly carefully, right? So if you look at an episode outline, it could be, for a Gary Player, it might be 12, 15 pages, because there's a lot to talk about. And being the type A I am, I'm sort of script based and want to follow this chronology and this order, if you will. Well, forget about it with Gary Player. You take the script, you set it aside, you turn him on, and off he goes, right? And so we get done with that episode, and I'm thinking, oh man, what a train wreck that was. I mean, he's all over the map, and I'm not able to follow my script and this and that. And then I set a link to my folks, and they listened to it, and they said, man, that was great. And then I get to editing it, and I listen to it, and I realize, at 86 years old, while it seems scattered, he stayed on point. I maybe couldn't follow it all the time, but he always came back to what we were talking about. I was fascinated by that. Of course, he's had a lot of experience and is quite adept at communicating. But so that one for me, while I thought it was off the rails, when you listen to it, and he'll touch on whatever he wants to touch on, but it was very, very coherent.
Yeah. I had the same experience when I interviewed him. It was like you put the question out there, you sit back, and you've got a fire hose of content coming back at you.
Yeah, you sure do. But he was marvelous, absolutely marvelous. Yeah.
What player is your biggest regret in not being able to get an interview?
Well, we've got 3 or 4 of them that just Raymond Floyd, who I've known Raymond since he was 18 years old, and I called him up and tried to convince him to do it, and he said that he made a decision that when he finished playing golf, he was finished talking about golf. And as much as he enjoyed the conversation that he and I had about him coming on the podcast, he wasn't going to do it. So that was pretty disappointing.
Yeah, I would love to hear him talk about his early years on tour.
Oh, yeah. Him and Trevino, the mix they had, the games they had out in El Paso and all that stuff. I mean, that would have been great to hear. Of course, we heard a little bit of that from Lee, but it would have been, it's always nice to hear the other side too.
Larry,
Go ahead.
I'll just interject. I grew up in sales, and so when I hear no, it really means maybe. So I'm still hopeful we'll get guys like Raymond Floyd on. Johnny Miller's another one that said, when I retired, I retired. And so we're hopeful that somebody can get to him and say, hey, you got to be part of this, But I'll give you a few others that you talked about not getting them in time. Of course, Don January we missed. Jackie Burke we missed. Would have loved to have gotten Tom Weiskopf. And, Bruce was in contact with those guys, but judgment said that it probably wasn't best. And Bruce, I guess you always hoped we'd started before 2016 so we could got one other guy. That guy from Latrobe.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been great.
I'd also love to go back in time and hear you two talk with a good friend of yours, Bruce, and that would be Ben Hogan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that would have been great to listen to him. I've got, it was a great pleasure of mine to spend 7 years with him, playing golf just about every tournament that we ever played together, and to know the things that he did for people that other people had no idea of just what a generous individual he was, and a great patriot too. Served loved the army, and was just a fabulous guy, really.
You think he would have come on the show, Bruce?
Yeah, he'd have come on the show. I did ask him at one time to come on a show. I don't know if Larry's heard this or not, but when I was working for NBC, the first televised tournament of the senior tour was at Onion Creek, and John Brody was my play-by-play guy, and I was the color person. And Don Olmeyer had just come over from ABC to NBC to run the golf program, and he said to me, "Look, I know I know you're good friends with Hogan." This is now 1980, of course, and my time with him was 62 through 69, so we were a few years after that, but I stayed in touch with him and saw him at his factory and stuff like that. But he said, "I know you know Mr. Hogan well. Wouldn't it be great to have him in the booth with you and John on Sunday?" And I said, yeah, boy, that'd be terrific, but he won't do it. And Olmeyer looked, "What do you mean he won't do it?" I said, "No, I know the guy well enough that he won't do it. He'll probably say to me, that would be nice, Bruce, but if I was to do that, I'd be taking away from what you guys are doing this particular week, the first televised golf tournament for the senior tour." So, case in point about him, he would have, if he'd have come to the tournament, obviously everybody would have wanted to, interview him and do this, and then, but he just, I knew he wouldn't do it.
Well, let's talk about your broadcasting career. First of all, do you find you're using skills that you learned while being a broadcaster in the television booth?
No, I don't think so. No. I got a lot of help when I first started in the television business. I said to Don Olmeyer, I said, "Can you tell me what I sort of lead me what to do?" He said, "Yeah, I'll give you one piece of advice. Remember that what you see, the people that this broadcast is going to sees the same thing. So don't talk about that. Talk about your relationship with players and the weather and clubs and this and that. But, don't tell me the day it's a lovely sunny day out here, because they can see that." So it was pretty good advice, really.
What do you think of the condition of television broadcasting currently for golf?
I think they've made some great steps forward with their, ability to watch the flight of a golf ball and stuff like that. I personally still would like to see more golf shots, but.
Let me name a few of the greats in the game and tell me what comes to mind with their life story. And the first one would be Lee Trevino.
You want me to do that,
Bruce?
Yeah, I don't mean this to be in a derogatory way to Jack Nicklaus, who's won 18 majors, but I always felt like that from a ball control standpoint, that Hogan was the best that I ever played with. And the second best as far as elevation control with golf clubs would be Lee Trevino. So I class him as the second best ball striker that I ever played golf with. And the only thing that's a little bit disappointing about Lee is you can't get any conversation with him.
Well, you can, but it's one way.
No, I've always enjoyed playing golf with him. Shall I tell him the story about the Hope?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure. Absolutely.
So I'd won a couple of tournaments playing with Trevino, and then we get to the Bob Hope, and I'm coming down the 17th hole and looked like I'm going to win the golf tournament. I hit a nice drive down the middle of the fairway and about 10 or 12 yards past him, and I was over on the side of the fairway getting yardage, and I walked back. I said to my caddy, Smithy, I said, so what do we got? He said, you got 137 to the front, 158 to the hole. What do you think? What do you think? And I looked down the bag, and I could only see one club, and it was a 7-iron, and there was a hand around the rest of the clubs. Not a word was spoken. Nobody said a word. So when we got through, I said to him, Lee, I don't know whether you should have done something like that. He said, well, I've known you a long time, and I admire the way you play, he said, and the only way you could have lost the golf tournament was to taken the wrong club because there was an out of bounds at the back, see? So there I was with a 7-iron.
How about Al Geiberger? What comes to mind when I mention his name?
What comes to mind to me is how the hell he ever shot 59 on that golf course, because I played that day, and I think he beat everybody that played the golf that day by about 6 shots. It was I think the first time we'd ever played that golf course, maybe the second time, but I think it was the first time. And back in those days, that was a tough golf course. Wooden clubs and balls that go out of shape. And he shoots 59.
And the greens were kind of bumpy, and they were playing preferred lies.
Yeah,
he was playing. He was playing with a playing partner who shot a 79 that day.
Yeah,
I'm not sure he shot.
Dave Stockton.
Yeah, I'm not sure he shot that good, did he? I thought he shot in the 80s that day. But what's interesting about that win was he didn't shoot around in the 60s and won the golf tournament.
Won the tournament. Yeah,
yeah. In fact, it got kind of tight in the fourth round for him, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
I think
it was pretty tight.
Yeah.
I think he told me that he had to give himself a good talking to.
But that golf course was a real golf course. I mean, it was. That was almost a 7,200 or so yard golf course, which back then with that equipment, Bruce, was that's plenty long.
It was very difficult golf course back then. Yeah.
He was a pretty easy interview as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, good guy.
He was. Yeah.
Good
guy,
great guy.
And you could tell the affinity for Dave Stockton. They're both USC grads and had a lot of connection together. And
I had the privilege of interviewing them together. Yeah, I had the privilege of interviewing them together. So they were giving each other the rib every chance they had.
Yeah.
It was real fun.
Yeah.
What would be this is for both of you too. What is your dream foursome of 3 other players, dead or alive? And on what would be your dream course to play that round?
Go ahead, Bruce. Why don't you start with that one?
Boy. Oh, I've played with some presidents and heads of, commercial companies and Dean Martin and, I don't know. I think a couple of years ago I got to play a dream round for me with 3 people. One was my oldest son, the second was my youngest son, and the third was my firstborn grandson. And we got to play Pebble Beach one Thursday morning. We teed off about 7:45, there was no wind, and it was a lovely sunny day, and that was paradise to me. So I think I might have played my greatest round with 3 other people.
You're lucky.
Yeah.
You're lucky. That sounds like a beautiful day.
Yeah.
How about you, Michael?
I'd probably go the family route. I'd say, my dad, who Bruce knows, is 93, be 94 in the fall, doing fine. But he stopped playing about 20 some years ago, and he and I and my two brothers used to go to the Masters every year back in the 90s. We went every year, not for the tournament, just for practice rounds, and the par 3 in particular, right? So fond memories of that, and we'd always tie a little golf into it. So it was my two brothers and my dad would probably be the foursome. I think if we went to somebody, famous, and I went to golfers, it would probably be Hogan, Palmer, and Ballesteros.
That
Pretty
would
good.
be a wild round.
Mm.
Yeah, you'd have Hogan in the middle of the fairway. Seve would be off on
Who knows
on
where?
either side.
Yeah, but it'd be a scramble. See,
And
it'd be a
Palmer would be
scramble.
somewhere in between.
You asked about venue, Bruce. What would be your dream venue or venues? Because you've played a lot of them.
Yeah, I do love the standing on the 7th tee at Pebble. It's might be one of the prettiest places in the whole world. But golf course, I don't know. I love a golf course in Sydney called New South Wales. It's out in La Perouse. It's one of my all-time favorite golf courses. Not just because I won the state amateur championship there, but it's a great facility. If anybody listening ever gets a chance when they get to Sydney to play New South Wales Golf Club, I'd recommend it highly.
And yours, Michael?
It's hard to pick one. I'm heading to the Sandbelt. Bruce knows in the month of April I'll be down there and try to get a lot of golf in down there. Never played there, but I know of a lot of the beautiful clubs and courses that are down there. I guess, just sticking with stuff I've played, hard to beat Carmel and Monterey in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Really
the beauty.
Yeah.
And then, in terms of tradition and sort of the vibe and the feel you get, hard to beat stepping on or stepping off the old course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that I hear in just about every episode of your podcast, and I know it's true for both of you as it is for me, is that our gateway into the game is our fathers. And why don't you speak about that for just a little bit?
I think you're right. We had it again today when we did Jenny. Her mum and dad were single-digit players, so it was. I think they just passed it down to her. But I think most of the people that we've talked to, whether their father played golf or not, had an influence on them too. Not necessarily that they were good players, but they seem to influence their sons and daughters to play the game.
Yeah, Michael, you said that your father's 94. I have a 95-year-old father who got me into the game. And I can still remember the day that I beat him for the first time.
Yeah, he took me out at age 8 to a 9-hole club. It was the Pontiac Elks course in Pontiac, Illinois. It's now 18 holes, but 9 holes. A friend of his that we were playing with, and this is back probably, what would this be, 1963. And Bruce, this came up, I think Jenny was asking, when did 7 woods and 11 woods and whatever come about? Well, he had a full set of woods, 1963, including a 15 wood. That's my memories of my first round.
Yeah.
Bruce, how many courses have you designed around the world?
143. That's what my wife's total is. Everybody says it's 150, but my wife said, no, it's only 143. She always put me in my place.
I would defer to Gloria.
Yeah, she
Never
always
argue
put
with
me
her
in
wife.
my place.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Larry's something that your listeners would be interested in is who his partner was and the connections his partner was for a lot of the courses to a couple of the founders of the LPGA Tour.
That's right.
Yeah, let's talk
The Bauer
about
sisters. Yeah, Robert von Higge, yeah.
Yep.
Married both sisters. That's an interesting trick,
He
isn't
married
it?
both sisters?
Yeah.
Well, where can people find For the Good of the Game?
Oh, Spotify, Apple, For the Good of the Game website. That's probably the best place, wouldn't you think, Mike? And they can get on the website and sign up and get all of our releases as they come out, as you know, when they want to.
Yeah, exactly.
And how often do you drop a new episode?
We do it every Thursday, new content. And then because we have 90 or so interviews already published out there, we sort of rotate them, right? So every day you'll see one from the bottom pull up to the top. So every, 4 times a year now, you'll see Bruce Devlin's story or Gary Player's story or Jack Nicklaus's story. And but every Thursday is when we drop new episodes, generally 2, 3, 4 parts, depending on, the length of the interview and so forth and the record of the player. And so today we released parts 1, 2, and 3 of Karen Stuppel's story. Karen growing up in Deal, England, and playing most of her golf at Prince's and Royal Syncports, which are a couple of the early open venues that no longer host the championship. Yeah.
Well, again, it's a fantastic podcast. Is there anything else you guys want to add?
How about you, Bruce?
No, I'm just the idea of the archiving of all of these podcasts is very important to us, and we have contracts with the PGA Tour. PGA of America has a contract at hand. I don't think we have an executor yet, though, do we, Mike?
Not
or
yet,
is it?
no.
Not yet, I don't think.
No, but working.
Yeah.
Same thing with the LPGA
with the
Tour,
LPGA,
Texas Golf Hall of Fame.
Yeah, so
But you do have something in contracted with the USGA. Is that correct?
correct.
That's right. Yeah, but
Which is great.
we figured each of the major golf organizations would have an interest in some or all of this content, right? So that could be the R&A, it could be Augusta, it could be anybody that hosts a major golf organization. So most of them we've talked to and are in the process of putting something together with everyone in an attempt to get this as broadly distributed as possible.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time. I know how busy it is to put a podcast together. We're actually doing the easy part right now, in my opinion.
You're right.
Yeah, no, that's
Exactly
true.
right.
That's true. You're absolutely right. Well, thank you for your time, Larry.
Well, thank you. And again, I want to thank you, Bruce, for the fantastic day that I had at Shady Oaks, interviewing you and then going out. It was the most fun golf I've ever had in temperatures above 100 degrees.
Well,
Larry, that's nice to hear because I've never gotten an invitation to Shady Oaks. So you must really rate with this guy.
yeah, well,
He did me a solid. He did me a solid.
Hey, listen, we enjoy your work as well. I know
Yes.
you put a lot of time into your weekly
Thank
newsletter that covers a lot of the events from the 60s and 70s. That's always fun to reflect back on that stuff.
Yeah.
Of course, your biography, Tony Lima, and some of the other writings you've done. So we
Been
appreciate
great.
all you're doing in
Thank you.
helping preserve golf history as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thanks again, you guys.
You bet.
We'll wrap this up.
Thank you, Larry.
Pleasure to talk to you.
Nice being with you. Thanks.
Nice being with you, too. Thanks. How was that? I really appreciate the time that Michael and Bruce took to talk with me. These are two of the finest gentlemen that you will find in the golf industry. And I strongly recommend that you check out their podcast, For the Good of the Game. You can find it wherever you download your podcasts or at the website For the Good of the Game. You will be enthralled for hours as they talk to most of the living legends in golf history. And if you are into the history of the PGA Tour in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, be sure to check out the Tour Backspin Substack at larrybosch.substack.com. Sign up for a free subscription. It'll show up in your email inbox every Thursday morning with a story, a historical story, that shares some sort of DNA with the tournament currently being played on the PGA Tour. Again, that's larrybosch.substack.com. Thanks for watching. Let's go out with some surf music.